Hello all, this is Les Posen, Fear of Flying clinical psychologist. Welcome to the channel. For those of you who've been recent subscribers looking for information about events to do with your flying experiences, welcome. If you're new here, you've just dropped in because of, I don't know, recent events that have happened in the world of flying. I hope you're going to find what I've got to say interesting. I will say that there have been a number of my own patients who've contacted me either before an upcoming flight or during our sessions to ask me about a particular flight that occurred this week. I'm recording this on Friday, May 24th. It's almost 4 p.m. in Australia, early morning in Europe. And an event occurred this week involving Singapore Airlines. And if you're a watcher of news or YouTube videos, whatever, you really could not escape the news of this particular incident, which involved a Singapore Airlines 777 on its way from London to Singapore, one of the most used flight routes in the world, used by many airlines, not just Singapore. And an incident occurred about an hour and a half, 2 hours out of Singapore. There may have been a luncheon meal being tidied up at the time. The plane, I think, was due to land at 3:45. We'll find out some details for you. I want to say at the outset, like many incidents like this that result in injuries, and in this case, in the case of this particular flight, the death due to a heart attack, it would appear, of an older gentleman on board the plane. And there may in fact be subsequent deaths for people who are critically injured who are now in hospital in Bangkok. This story's got legs. It's going to keep on rolling on. But these stories tend to run in a certain sequence. In the immediacy of it, there are explanations and efforts to try and understand what exactly has happened, what has caused this. And in modern terms, fortunately this time we didn't hear, oh, it was a terrorist attack. It was very clearly a turbulence episode that occurred this. But as you will know, in some other instances, it's terrorism that's the first order of call. What usually then happens is that some explanation is waited for as to what exactly happened and how many injuries there were, and there's going to be variations on that, and then some follow-up as to what's going on the ground where the aircraft landed. The next thing that usually happens with these things is that ex-pilots, captains of aircraft of a similar nature or international aircraft, are then trotted out to give a comment and their guesstimate of what's happened. And they'll often be asked, have you experienced such a thing as this? And what's your explanation of what happened? What would the pilots have been doing at the time? And how do they recover? They may be asked to rate their performance. And of course, they're going on as much information as basically you and I have, unless they've got some sort of secret channel into the world of pilots who are actually flying that plane. So those pilots tend to get trotted out. And I must share with you, I'm aware of some of those pilots. Their work is known to me, and I must share with you, sadly, that I've yet to hear any of them saying anything that promotes, in my mind, any great confidence in that what they've had to say will help my patients and you as a passenger feel any better about this. It's not been good media. I've got to tell you, it's not been good media. And so I would tend to ignore those. I mean, you can listen to them, but I tend to ignore them because I just don't find they've really summed up, and they're really operating on a base of information which has yet to be confirmed. That's going to take quite some time after the event that occurred this week. Then you get your other people get trotted out. I haven't seen a psychologist trotted out, so I'm doing this off my own bat, because things will run of their own course. What will happen is that I'm now seeing, several days later, reports of those injured being interviewed in hospital. What happened to you? How are your injuries? Are you recovering? How's the airline been helping you out? There were about 50 Australians on board that aircraft, because that flight from London to Singapore often then continues on from Singapore to Australia, to Brisbane, Perth, Melbourne, Adelaide, wherever it might be, Sydney. And so there are a lot of Australians who do this particular flight. And so, of course, the Australian media jumped in and found some passengers who were recovering in hospital, so that made for good television. And I must say, on my own behalf, to all those passengers who were recovering, and the family of the lost of the man who was deceased, my sincere condolences. I hope those who have survived this can get back in the air as quick as possible. But I know what's going to happen for some of you. In any case, let's find out what actually happens, because these are the sort of stories that I get asked about, sometimes by the media, but more importantly by my own passengers, my own patients. So I've prepared some material for you. I will say to you, there's one source that I found by accident on YouTube, and I've seen this man's videos before. It's a really good video. He's done a really nice job of summarizing what happened. He's not making guesses. He's talking about it from a safety point of view. He has gone to the evidence base for what happens in turbulence and how much injury does turbulence cause in the world's airlines around the world. And most importantly, he looks at references to, do planes get damaged in these sort of extreme incidences? And he echoes what I've been saying to my patients. No. Patients need to know, you need to know, that planes are built nowadays in order to be certified to fly. They're tested and built in ways that they can withstand not just 100% of the world's worst weather that can be thrown at them. And this one in Singapore, or approaching Singapore, may be at the 90 or 95th percentile level. Because don't forget, there's tornadoes and hurricanes, which are even stronger than this, that you don't go into unless you of course are flying a NASA plane and you are getting away in there to do some scientific investigations. So there's worse weather than this one, but most of the time people avoid it. This is about 90% maybe of the worst. And so planes are tested to not 100% of the worst of, not just, by the way, weather, but pilot handling. But they're taken to another quantum leap above that, and that's up to 150%. And if a plane's wings, because they're actually pulled up at the tips, and then to the point where the wing breaks. By the way, the wing doesn't break at where it joins to the plane, to the actual fuselage. That's actually probably the strongest part of the aircraft. It's called the wing box, and that's the strongest part, because don't forget, it's got to support undercarriage on hydraulics, and in large planes, fuel tanks are often there. So it's just one of the strongest parts of the plane. So when the wings do break under such severe force, which the plane will never ever encounter in real life flying, 150%, the wings tend to break somewhere between where the engine would be and the fuselage, maybe a little bit further down from the engines. Occasionally, a new aircraft type, by the way, the wings break less than 150%. 148% was one as for a fairly well-known Boeing aircraft. It was being made with new composite materials, new designs, and it broke at 148, and literally it was back to the drawing board. And airlines which had ordered that plane, expecting it to come into service at a certain date, as promised by Boeing, it didn't happen. It was delayed, and those airlines had to keep their older aircraft that they had assumed they could retire in service, and there were penalties paid in the millions of dollars by Boeing. It's a serious business, folks, really serious business. In any case, when you go and read the incident reports on severe turbulence that can cause injuries, you do not read of damage to the plane. I do imagine that this particular aircraft, because it's already sustained some internal damage from people and objects hitting floors, chairs, ceilings, and doorways, maybe in galleys, and so forth, clearly will have been taken out of service, nursed back home to Singapore without anybody on board. is my guess. We haven't even heard of what's happened to that plane. It may be being held in Bangkok for examination. I don't know. But sooner or later, it's going to go back to Bangkok, to Singapore, where it will be looked over with a fine-tooth comb, especially the wear and tear areas at the wing roots, where the engines. Don't forget, lots of stuff on planes move around, because if they were rock steady, they would crack. So the wing tips move around, where the engines, they move around on pylons. So planes move, things move. So all the wear and tear areas, well known to airlines, will be the next point of examination, just to make sure this aircraft is fit to fly, and there's been no other damage done externally to the aircraft that could affect its flying integrity. And also, don't forget, sometimes planes do get hit with lightning. Tends to hit the outside of the plane. Plane's constructed like a thermos flask. You've got an inner and outer tube, like a bicycle tube or a football, in and outer tube. The outer tube gets stuck. It runs along the plane's fuselage, discharges to earth through wicks on the plane's extremities. Technically speaking, the plane acts like a Faraday cage and doesn't get inside the plane. Sometimes a little tiny hole can be found on the hull. That's easily repaired, but the plane is usually inspected afterwards. So there's lots of stuff that is well known to airlines as to what can happen in such incidents. So let's have a look at this particular plane, because there's some things I want you to know about. We're going to use this website called FlightAware. Many of you will know about this. I'll just put myself over here for a moment. There's FlightAware. You can see that's this is my registration, FlightWise, yeah. And if I touch this, you can maybe see. I don't know if that's going to come up. Let's have a look and see. If I touch on this, I don't think it is. Oh yes, there you go. So you can see I've been using this for 15 years now. As a basic user, so I'm logged in. Anyway, let's go and have a look at this particular plane in question, and already comes up as Singapore 321. Let's click on that, and then we're going to scroll down, and I think now you can see some advertisements, because I've got the free one. So we can see this is the current. I'll get rid of this. There we go. This is the current flight. That's today's flight. It's in flight now. It left from Heathrow at 11:13 British Standard Time. That's this morning, my time, Melbourne time. I'll just get out of the way, you can have a look. Can you see that? Yeah. So it was scheduled to leave 11:43. By the time I'd actually left the ground, it was 11:13. And it was delayed by some 20 minutes, but a long taxi of 30 minutes, which would suggest lots of other aircraft on the ground. We can see, if I scroll down, you can see now the various, how it's been traveling, trying to avoid various areas. Sometimes those avoidances, why it's not going in a straight line, those avoidances are due to political situations where you can't fly. Sometimes it's due to localized weather patterns. Some of the things you can see here is some of the weather that's showing up. So you can see it's a Boeing 777, similar to the one that involved in this incident, and due to arrive in Singapore at 7 p.m. local time tonight. We can have a look down here, just above my head, where it's expected to arrive a little bit late. Scheduled to arrive at 6:08, it's going to arrive at 6:53 and be at the gate only after 10 minutes of taxiing. You can see that just above my head here. Yeah. Just scrolling down, we can see where it is at the moment. 527 miles per hour it's traveling at 35,000 feet, and it's going to cover a total distance of 6,770 miles. And you can see it's a Boeing, above my head, a Boeing 777-300ER, which is the same plane type as the one involved in this incident. So this over here on this side, over there, you can see the current flight. And now we can see the previous, see it says past flights. You can see the previous flights, and the one that we're interested in is the one that took off on Monday. I'm highlighting it now, on Monday the 20th of May. And you can see it actually landed at Bangkok Airport, BKK, after 11 hours and 7, so about an hour and almost 2 hours ahead of when it was expected to land. And if you go down below, this is the same aircraft, the same flight, and you can see here how it was diverted. Okay, now if we click on this, and you can follow me along and you can do this yourself, we can locate its, there we go, just scrolling. Now you can see, here it is. You can see some of the weather patterns that were present. I'll just, here, some of the weather patterns that were present. This is heat radar, by the way. This is weather radar. It's not actual photographs. Okay. That particular pilot that I was telling you about, who I'm going to recommend, has a very nice set of weather photos. So we can scroll down. This is the interesting part here, where we can see now on the left hand side there in green is the altitude, on the right hand side is the speed in miles per hour. Okay, we can see that there. So the plane does a normal takeoff, and you can see how it goes up in steps. Can you see that? Burns up a bit of fuel, goes up a bit higher, burns up a bit of fuel, goes up higher, a few little speed variations, and then it goes up higher again. And then around about here, can you see, I don't know if you can, there's a spike. Can you see that spike? I wonder if I can get in here a little bit bigger. See if we can scroll down. Yeah, a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger, yeah. You can follow this along. There we go. Ah, there we go. And you can see here's a spike. And we have to presume that's where this incident occurred. Very short, very sharp. Very short, very sharp. And then this line here, down here, is known as a controlled descent. Now, if we scroll down here and we go into view track log, and we have to assume this occurred around about, it landed at 3:45, so if we go to about 3 p.m. we'll be able to see this. So go to track log. You can do this with me if you like. We'll just go see if we can get into track log. Okay. Now we see this in a slightly different portrayal, and again, here's that spike. It's here. There's a spike there, and that's where it went up. Now, if we scroll all the way, these are all the different parameters, latitude and longitude, and this is in Australian Eastern Standard Time, direction, knots, and altitude. So you can see here, initial cruising altitude over this side here at 31,000 feet, pretty standard stuff, burns off some fuel, and what I'm looking for now, here's the next one where it climbs. You can see now, it climbs to 33,000 feet, burns up a bit of fuel. It then gets picked up again, and we can see here 33,000 feet. You can see 33,000 feet. Again to 35,000, and sits there at cruise, heading almost. You can see here 100 degrees, so it's heading almost due east. Almost due east, of course, would be 90 degrees, so it's slightly south of due east. It continues to 35,000 feet. Here's the speed. Here's the speed it's going at. Okay, here's the speed, and then what we're looking at is, and it's changing direction to go slightly south-southeast. Again, pick up, see over my shoulder here, 35,000, so it's cruising along quite nicely. Now it's turning almost due south, almost due south. Due south would be 180 degrees is due south, okay? So it's turning southerly. Slight turn, now it's heading due, almost exactly due east, that's the minus 89. Let's keep going down, still at roughly 35,000 feet, continues along, lots of 35,000 feet, it's cruising along. You can see the speed is pretty constant, direction is pretty constant. We're looking at a perturbation, so I'm just going to scroll down. It climbs to its final cruising altitude of 37,000 feet at at 5 o'clock my time here in Melbourne, and maintains 37,000 feet for some time. Yep, for some time. And then there appears to be a little bit of a change here. Not much, but it goes down by 75 and then it goes up by 300. Now, the flight aware information doesn't really give us what I think is important, and that is what was the rate and distance covered of the ascent and the descent during this turbulence event. Okay, how fast did it go up? How fast did it come back down? That's your extreme turbulence event. Remember, we've seen from FlightAware it's traveling forward at something like 500 knots, 530 or 40 miles an hour, whatever that happens to be, what 500 knots converts to. It's going fast that way. And what we're interested in is how far up does it go and how far down does it go and the speed with which it goes up, because that's going to determine your G-forces, and that's going to determine who stays in their seat and who floats above the seat and who's pushed down into the seat. Okay? In other words, who becomes disconnected from the plane in the sense that the plane moves and you stay where you are, in which case you hit the roof. So we have a diagram here I want to share with you, and I'll just get out of the way. This comes from a Flight Radar, from Flight Radar, which is another app that I use. And we can have a look here and just see what's going on. Let me point out what we're watching here. The blue line is the vertical rate in feet per minute, and that's this. Okay, 300 feet per minute, 600 feet per minute, 900 feet per minute, and so forth. Yeah, 1200 feet per minute, 1500 feet per minute, 800. This is how fast, in other words, the larger the number this way, the larger the number that way, the more rapidly the plane was moving. Okay? The yellow is the speed. Here's the speed. And as you can see, it's consistent. Look how straight that line is. It didn't change speed much at all. 520, 530 knots, whatever it happened to be. Okay? What we're interested in are the perturbations. The blue line is the actual altitude, which is here. And as we know, it was cruising at 37,000 feet. Okay, continues along, and there's a movement downwards, not by much. That looks, because here's 36,500. That's 500 foot difference. Okay, so what's that? Not even 100 foot. So that's maybe a 75 foot decrease, and then a sudden, that takes a, this is time by the way here. Okay, this is time in Zulu time, which is Greenwich Mean Time. Okay, so I guess the instant itself, what we're interested in is the instant itself goes from here to here. That's how long it takes. Okay, so if I draw the line down, starts about here. Okay. And that's roughly 7:49 Zulu or UTC. This part here, where the instant comes to an end, 7:49. You know what? It's about a minute and a bit. So this whole sequence that you're watching that caused the damage went for a minute. Okay. And you can now see that in the aftermath here, it smooths out at 37,000 feet. Of course, what we know is that it began a controlled descent down to 31,000 feet. Controlled descent. You're going to hear reports that it dropped 6,000. It didn't. That's not the incident in question. It was a controlled descent from 37,000 feet to 31,000 feet. in preparation for a landing in Bangkok. This crew would have had Bangkok Airport, BKK, nominated as an alternative when they planned this route in Heathrow. All along that route you've seen. Crew nominate alternative airports that the plane can be put down at in case of an emergency. And let me assure you, 80% of the time those emergencies are medical emergencies. They're not emergencies which are fuel or mechanical. In this case, it was weather. But the thing I want to point out to you, we didn't discuss this grey line here. You see this grey line, which is the rate of descent. So you can see it's bubbling along here. Yeah, hardly anything. Remember, this is feet per minute up, feet per minute down. It's in cruise, so there shouldn't be this very slight changes, 15 feet, 8 feet, bubbling along. Yeah, so there's a hint here. So the passengers would have experienced here a little bit of perturbation, mild chop, a little hint that that something's about to occur. It's possible that one of the crew, we'll hear stories that one of the cabin crew, senior cabin crew, may say to us, it felt I knew something was about to happen, and they may have been picking up on this bumpiness because it was quite smooth before then. They pick up this perturbations up and up. So this would have already been some bumpiness. And it's possible that the tech crew are picking up on this. This is less than a minute. This is 30 seconds worth. Yeah. And then all of a sudden we go from stable flight, and there's a rapid change within a few seconds, and we're climbing at a rate of 900 feet per minute. We decrease rate by 300 feet, then another climb at a very high rate of 1200 feet per minute. I mean, remember, planes are taking off from the airports at something like 2,000, they're climbing out at something like 2,000 feet a minute. So this is half of that, but it's the rapidity with which it's climbing out. There's a sudden unexpected change, and then this is the biggie that does the damage, I would suggest, because this is the part where it's negative. It's the passengers would be experiencing a very strong falling sensation, and anyone who's not strapped in hits the ceiling. And then, of course, they fall. So up and then down, and it may well be that some of the damage is the up and some of the damage is going to be the down when they hit the deck. So this is this big one, and you can see it changes from climbing at 1,500 feet per minute to descending at 1,500 feet per minute. Yeah, that's 3,000 feet difference. That's going to cause some damage. Okay, that's what it is. And then there's another upward, and then a series of downwards, and then it finds some stability. So this lasts about a minute, and I can significantly imagine just how terrifying this would have been, because this would have been a plane that would have felt to the passengers as being completely out of control. Yeah. We will have to wait to hear from the pilots, probably in an official report, of what their experience was and what they were doing. And this is when it would be really nice to hear from very experienced pilots looking at this to say, in all likelihood, if it was me, this is what I would have been doing. Now, don't forget this, it's possible that the plane's automatic pilot was kicked out and they would have been trying to fly it manually. I doubt that very much. You don't want to fly, I don't think you want to fly 777 manually at 37,000 feet. They would have tried to kick in, if it was kicked out. Remember, they've got 3 autopilots. It's possible that one was kicked out because of the severity, but they would have tried to restore it, and it looks as if within a minute or so, 2 minutes, something like this, they were able to restore, speed didn't change, they were able to restore altitude, and then be on their way. So the altitude change, if this is the peak of altitude here, is only 250 feet. Okay, so it dropped by 50 feet or 20 feet, up, and then a big one, and then a down. And this is nothing. This is 15, 20 feet tops. It's hardly anything. But it's, again, it's the speed with which this happens. It's the acceleration. So if you've got a really fast car and you've got a really slow car, both will get, say, to 60 miles an hour. But if I put you in my electric car, which gets there in 4.4 seconds, and you're driving your little leisurely Toyota Corolla, which gets there in 9 seconds, it takes you twice as long, but I can assure you the G-forces you'll experience in my car will push you back. And I can't put my foot down in my car because I suffer motion sickness and I'll get ill in that car. So it's nice to have that power on reserve, but I never use it. It's too much for me. And the next, my model next up does that 4.4 seconds in something like 3.1. It's even faster. So the G-forces in some of these really fast EVs are actually going beyond 1G. In other words, fast, more than what you'd experience falling out of a plane if you're parachuting. Anyway, I hope this helps you understand what went on with this flight. It didn't drop 6,000 feet. We're talking quite small distances up and down, but that's not the issue. It's the rapidity with which it goes up and down that causes the damage. Okay? And that would also produce the shock. And even for those passengers in their seatbelt, I would suggest very few of them would have been saying to themselves, oh, my seatbelt's on, I'm pretty safe, unless of course they're my patients. But I think most people would lose their stuff in this sort of situation. I don't know how I would handle it either. All I know is I would want to get back on a plane as soon as possible and not have this experience decide for me the rest of my flying career. I'd want to talk to someone who knows about this, find out as much as I can about what happened. I wouldn't try and shirk it and avoid it. And I'd try and get back in as quickly as I can at Singapore Airlines expense and get me home. And if I had to see a psychologist because I need some help, then yeah, help talk me through this. But I'm hoping this video will help any of you who've been in a situation like this or who are taking flights and are really worried about what's going on. I hope I've been able to explain it. Anyway, put some comments down there if you have questions and I'll try and do my best to explain any more details. Hope that's been useful. Happy landings, everybody. Catch you another time.